As far as I'm concerned, buying a car is an emotional decision. Now, not everyone will agree with that, but regardless of what you believe, this video is here to show you why following your heart really isn't a bad thing. And the Suzuki Jimny is here to help me tell you why. A lot of us love crunching numbers before buying big ticket items, especially when it's something as expensive as a brand new car. We scour brochures and spec sheets hoping to make a rational or informed decision. But the thing is, the right car never really boils down to which has the most horsepower, the most space, or even the most features. The right car is the one that'll make you happiest given your set budget. And to help me drive my point home, let's take a closer look at the Suzuki Jimny. One glance at this exterior will already tell you that this look is far from modern. In fact, the Suzuki Jimny looks rather old school, and that's not based on my opinion. That's really the way this thing was meant to look. Because while some cars are redesigned every 5 years, the gap between this one and the third generation one is 20 years. And you'd think that after waiting that long, they'd reinvent the wheel or come up with something evolutionary. But nope, Suzuki wanted to make sure that the Jimny stayed true to its roots. In fact, this has design cues from the previous generation models. Take the headlights, for example. They're round and are flanked with independent turn signals, just like on the first generation model. You even get these horizontal lines here and a clamshell hood, plus rear taillights that are mounted on the bumpers, just like the second generation model. Then of course you have this grille with the vertical slats to pay tribute to the previous generation Jimny. You'll see that there's really no attempt here to make this look modern, aside from the projector-type LED headlights. Overall, the design is boxy, and if I'm completely honest, utilitarian. You'll see that the washers for the windshield and the headlights are exposed. The hinges for the rear door aren't exactly concealed. And as functional as these drip rails are, they look like something you'd find on a car from the 70s. And for whatever reason, you have this antenna which is placed on the far right, which I'm sure anyone with OCD won't fail to notice. But if you were to ask me, is this the type of vehicle that would make me look over my shoulder or turn around after leaving it when parked? Well, the answer to that is absolutely. It's a stunner. In fact, it's all those quirks I just mentioned that really gives the Jimny its appeal. And it's a similar story when you step inside. This interior makes no attempt to look modern or even flamboyant. Everything here is still pretty much old school, from the instrument cluster to some of the switchgear. Everything here looks pretty much retro, and I really dig it. Now there are some modern touches, such as this infotainment screen, which also comes with a clinometer. And thankfully this also has a rear view camera and backup sensors. The only other modern touch here is this fully automatic climate control system, which makes use of physical knobs, which I really like. But the materials used here are quite basic. In fact, you get a lot of exposed metal at the back. There are also lots of hard plastic, which is fine and forgivable, not because of its price point, but the fact that this car is intended to be a rugged vehicle. So that's exactly how you want it. Now, space also isn't one of the Jimny's strong suits. In fact, you can barely squeeze 2 adults back there. And when it comes to storage space, even with those seats down, it isn't exactly generous. So overall, you have an interior that isn't spacious, it isn't modern, and it isn't exactly feature-packed. But it has character. But is that enough to appeal to your emotions? I guess the real question is, how has the Suzuki Jimny managed to capture so many hearts despite all its shortcomings? Well, maybe we should get this out on the road and find out. Now, we all know that the Suzuki Jimny is a very capable off-roader. It's a body-on-frame setup with long suspension travel. And as well as it performs off-road, its on-road driving dynamics isn't exactly what you'd call textbook when it comes to what good driving dynamics should be. For starters, the steering is actually pretty vague. Now, it is light, but the steering ratio is so slow that you have to turn the wheel quite a fair bit before you actually feel the car turning. And that's even despite the fact that it has a short wheelbase. And even if the suspension is soft and does a pretty good job in dealing with road imperfections, it's soft to a point where it leans a fair bit when you turn at high speed. So it doesn't exactly hit a home run when it comes to handling. But what about the power? So under the hood, you have a 1.5 four-cylinder engine which pumps out around 100 horsepower. And that really isn't anything to write home about. But at the very least, it does feel adequate. It never feels sluggish. But is it enough to make your heart skip a beat? No, it isn't. And then you have the 5-speed automatic transmission. And it actually stays on lower gears for extended periods of time. So when you're driving around 100 kilometers an hour, it's doing around 3,000 RPM, which makes the engine a bit more noisy than you want it to be. NVH also isn't particularly good. So does that mean it's a chore to drive? Absolutely not. There's something about this car that makes you want to keep driving it, and it'll never feel taxing. For starters, it's very small and the visibility is really, really good. But beyond that, beyond the visibility, I said that this car didn't have good driving dynamics from a textbook standpoint. But it still allows you to interact with it in the sense that you still feel in unison with the vehicle, despite the fact that it actually feels kind of vague. So I know it's kind of hard to explain what I'm feeling right now, but I guess the best way to put it is like cooking a dish with all the ingredients that you're not particularly fond of, but once you taste the dish, you just can't get enough of it. And I know it's hard to substantiate that claim in the absence of numbers or even concrete examples of what makes this so good to drive. But if it's any consolation, I'm not the only one who feels that way. You see, the Jimny has achieved what hardly any other car has achieved at this price point, and that's cult car status. Suzuki have managed to sell over 3 million of these things worldwide. And the demand for this was so high at one point that you'd have to wait over a year just to get your hands on one. And for those who were lucky enough to do so, some of them even sold their Jimny higher than when they purchased it brand new. And that tells a lot. Now, the Jimny isn't only something that caters to the mass market. This caters to celebrities, and you wouldn't be surprised to find one of these things sharing a garage with other exotics. Now, I'm sure a lot of you already know what this car is really capable of doing. But is it fair to attribute all its success simply to its off-road capabilities? Because we all know that this has the goods to make it a proper off-roader. Like I said earlier, it's a body-on-frame setup, it has a 3-link rigid axle, and of course 4-wheel drive with low-range transfer gear and brake LSD traction control. And all those features work together to ensure that this has all 4 wheels planted as much as possible at any given time, or under any road conditions. But aside from that, given its short wheelbase, high ground clearance, and the fact that the wheels are as close as possible to the corners, it gives the car the ideal approach, departure, and ramp breakover angle to clear the most rugged terrain. And it's a shame that we're not in its natural habitat to really demonstrate its full potential. But what sets this apart from other off-roaders is just how easy it is to drive. Now, I mentioned earlier that this has brake LSD traction control and hill descent control. And that allows you to navigate better by applying the proper brake pressure on each individual wheel so you can focus on the steering. It also ensures you have utmost grip. So just to demonstrate how well the system works, I'm going to go down this extremely steep road. And I'm going to do that without stepping on the brakes. So first, let me make sure that hill descent control is on. And then let me engage the 4-wheel drive system. Okay, I think we're good to go. Wish me luck. Here we go. So I'm crawling. Foot off the brake now. In 3, 2, 1. Wow. So now I know what it feels like to be a passenger, even when you're behind the wheel. And it keeps it below 10 kilometers an hour, which is pretty good. This is also a great way to demonstrate the Jimny's approach and departure angle. Yep, not a single scrape. But again, the question I raised earlier was whether or not this thing has more to offer aside from its stellar off-road capabilities. Despite what this vehicle is capable of doing off-road, what makes it so appealing to so many people goes way beyond that. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this vehicle is honest. It doesn't try to be anything it isn't, and that's what makes it pure. The heart doesn't have the ability to decipher numbers, but it sure as hell knows what makes you happy. The Suzuki Jimny triggers an inward emotion, which means it doesn't boil down to how you feel about this car. It boils down to how this car makes you feel about yourself. I'm no off-road enthusiast, though I'm sure it's a lot of fun. But despite me not being an off-road junkie, I want this. I want this so bad.